Okay, well, we'll start with Bob, and we've got a whole bunch of people arriving in the group. We'll ask people to we're having 5-minute provocations, and then we're going to ask people to come on. If you have a question, you can add your audio and video. We can bring you on camera. You can ask your question, and then you can jump off again. So we don't have everybody on screen simultaneously. But thank you, everybody, for coming today. This is for our workshop, Social Inclusion in Community Climate Change Action. And I'd like to welcome Bob, Tess, and Ollie today, who are all activists and working hard and working in the pragmatic end of engaging communities in a just transition. And one of the key lessons we learned from moving through our 2 previous workshops into just transitions for the northeast of Scotland, that it's really important to devise and understand and develop and apply practical ways of engaging communities, engaging parts of the community who aren't usually engaged in the climate change conversation, different cultural groups within the community, those who are not traditionally involved in. And so today we want to hear about actual innovative and great ways of doing that, and provide some advice to everybody who here is attending, and have a good discussion after our provocations around how we can engage and be inclusive in a really practical way on the ground. So without further ado, Bob, thank you very much for joining us today, and I'll hand over to you for your 5-minute provocation.
Cheers, Davis. Very pleased to be here, everybody. Thank you for having me. So I'm Bob Walley. I'm a researcher in climate change engagement and communication with the University of Central Lancashire, and co-founder of the Manchester-based cooperative Envirolution. So we are a community benefit society formed in 2010 to act as a platform for those groups and individuals making real and positive impacts in communities across the north of England. So we organise events designed to increase engagement with people who are not currently engaging with climate change as a subject. So how do we do that then? Our events are in the local parks and public spaces that people use on a sunny day anyway. And so luckily, so far, we've been blessed mostly with sunny days for our events, meaning that Envirolution can expect to welcome around 6,000 people over the day from the surrounding diverse communities in that local area. So we go to them. Very importantly, they are free, and we have 2 solar power stages playing world music to lure people in to see what it's all about. It doesn't have the words climate change written all over it, but it does have all vegan food stalls, so people can buy hot dogs which look like hot dogs and can be pleasantly surprised when we tell them that they're vegan. Our games and activities with the kids are designed to make people smile, but also contain a message and something to think about. Like our Food Miles Shy, which is a coconut shy, but has food from all over the world, and the sign for it provides info on how many miles it's travelled from. We have others like Whack a Fat Cat and Capitalism Coffin, all this sort of madness. But these are gateway activities. These are designed to act as stage 1 engagement sort of stuff, motivate conversations, inspire questions. But then there are our workshops and talks delivered by experts and organisations who are doing amazing things in communities around the north of England. The golden Envirolution rule is you're not allowed to come and just sit behind a table with leaflets. No, all activities have to be interactive and engaging and be relevant and appropriate to the people local to that area. For instance, there's a lot of terraced houses in Manchester. There's a lot of alleyways behind them that act as dumps for shopping trolleys, old mattresses. So we have groups run stuff who get alleyway regeneration projects up and running, or utilising other wasteland for play areas, green craft stuff, food growing workshops, all of that. So these all provide opportunities for people to get involved, build employability and training, tackling loneliness and social isolation, whilst also providing a platform for people to learn more about climate change, what they can do locally, which is relevant and appropriate to them and their circumstances. As well as our events, we also run projects. So most recently, we ran Manchester's first climate change assembly, which recruited 108 people from across the city by using advertising like, what would you like your city to look like? Come and have your say in the future of Manchester, that kind of thing. The climate change assembly part was present, but less obvious. So we got a wide range of participants as far as knowledge and engagement with the subject. Some who were very switched on, knew a lot of terminology, others who just had kids and seen a documentary, got a bit scared. You know, like so many, they just didn't know where to start, how they could possibly make any kind of difference. They needed something proactive to do. So the Assembly provided the opportunity for them to work with others from the local neighbourhood to work on action plans for their areas on subjects like buildings and energy, transport, fashion and retail, food and agriculture. Whilst working together on these, they also created a mandate which represents actions that are crucial for us to meet our greenhouse gas emission reduction targets, but are not possible for them to do. Infrastructure and policy change needs to come from higher up. So local council, businesses, national government. They then presented this mandate to otherwise inaccessible members of Manchester City Council executive team. So this is now being used to inform future actions, being built into the ward plans, and continues to be pushed by us and our partners. The participants are in their area contact groups, and they now self-organise. And some have now got jobs in the sector by just being a part of the process and building contacts and awareness of their options. So it's been very successful. We're now looking to run one with under 18s this year with similar aims of providing opportunities to mobilise, giving options to people that they might not be aware of otherwise. These are not community consultations. I've had enough of those, as I'm sure you have too. These provide the chance to bring groups of people together, to voice their concerns, to hire up and mobilise using informed actions to work towards the changes they want to see. That's us and a whole lot more, but that's probably my 5 minutes, I would imagine. So I'll pass on to Tess. Is it that?
Thank you, Bob. And Bob, if you want to share either your contact details or your organisation in the chat, please do, and people can get in touch. And also, incredibly rude of me, Becky, I didn't introduce you as well. I was all in a rush and a kerfuffle. So please, Becky, could you introduce yourself?
Hi, yes. So I'm Rebecca Ford. I'm based at the University of Strathclyde, and along with Tavis, responsible for some work on the Scottish University's Insight Institute programme that is aligned very closely with the wider workshop that we are delivering today.
Thanks, Becky. And now I'd like to pass over to Tess Humble from Breathe. You can tell us about Breathe, and looking forward to hear from you.
Thank you, Tavis, and thank you, Bob. I love hearing you chat. I love the way you think about these things. It's really nice to hear more about what you do. So I'm here under my Breathe capacity, but I'm actually going to talk about my role as the mobilisation officer for the COP26 coalition. And Ollie will talk more about Breathe and Breathe organising. And I particularly want to talk about the COP26 coalition because the role of the COP26 coalition was to bring marginalised communities to the forefront of the climate fight, right, under the ban of climate justice. So the last year of my life has involved bringing these different marginalised groups to the forefront of the climate movement, but doing so whilst bringing them into conversation with other sections of society, if that is faith groups or youth groups, as well as bringing them into deep conversation with the traditional climate movement. And then using this to create active solidarity and build power collectively. So in organising across the UK for the COP, we carried out broad engagement, awareness raising, political education, a discussion around the term climate justice. But really critically, the main question throughout was, what does climate justice mean for you and for your community? So I'll talk about what this looked like specifically in Glasgow. My role was to help oversee engagement with the people of Glasgow on climate justice and alternative narrative to COP, and to empower them within the COP process. And we used three main tactics within Glasgow. One, we held space exclusively for marginalised groups on their terms. These meetings were shaped, led and facilitated by the different groups themselves. To give you an idea of what these groups look like, some of them were included migrant justice groups and diaspora communities, others were working class communities, and so on. These communities know their pain and their needs more than anyone else. They know their culture of organising and the language that they use. So that comes back to what Bob was saying about, do we use the term climate justice? How do we lure people in, or how do we shape these conversations so they're relevant to the folks within the room? So these groups are best fitted to lead on these conversations. So facilitation support might be provided, but it's really crucial in my understanding that it's light and it's minimal where possible. Also within these various communities, a big question of this is, how do you engage deeply? How do you engage broadly? So outreach was carried out through these various groups. So the Migrant Justice network that we were working with, there was the idea to invite diaspora groups from the entirety of Scotland. So we were given shout outs from Glasgow to Aberdeen to Inverness to across various parts of the Highlands, and asking folks into a larger conversation where we could deepen our conversation and deepen the narrative and deepen solidarity. Really importantly, there was never an assumption that we were educating people on climate change or climate justice. This is really problematic, and it makes people's concerns and their work seem invisible, that us as a demographic are the only people that care about climate change and the only people that I might have been doing work to mitigate that for a long time. And this reinforces the same problems. It doesn't mean that there can't be an exchange, but I think you do need to walk in assuming that we don't have all the information, right? Secondly, we had regular meetings with different groups organising for the COP. So we created space for Glaswegians and the cross-section of different groups to meet regularly, both on Zoom and in real life. This was space of conversation across different groups involved in climate justice and various social struggles. We intentionally made sure these spaces were places to socialise and to build relationships, often around about food and about music as well. And these weren't always huge in numbers, but they knew that we were there. They knew that we were constantly doing the work, and they knew that we were dedicated. And thus it's going through a process of building trust. And then lastly, we had more focused, larger events. And we called these Glasgow Assemblies. And these were events that brought together different topics and people affected by climate justice and a just transition as well, of course, is very much part of that. So that's trade unions, local community groups, and migrant justice groups, faith groups, and so on. And this was a space to share ideas, have a platform, exchange, and meet. These events were always co-hosted by different community of groups. One was co-hosted by Glasgow Against Closures. Another was co-hosted by Still Game in the Valley, who are looking to stop the sellout of their community land. So we use this as an opportunity to amplify and support their struggle. For example, with the Glasgow Against Closure ones, we started the assembly with a demonstration, a march led by Glasgow Against Closures through the south side of Glasgow, which ended at the site that we had the assembly on. These different tactics build several things. They allow space for different groups of being marginalised to build power within their communities in a way that makes sense to them. It allowed the various groups affected by climate change or just transition, in this case, to meet, exchange, and learn and work together. And also importantly, allowed for the realisation of common struggles and the fighting for a larger common cause. And creating a sense of commonality is crucial in the climate fight, particularly when it comes to just transition and climate justice. And also, it's really important to remember that when working with marginalised communities, many of these communities have been repeatedly hurt, repeatedly sidelined, if that is through displacement, loss of industry, forced into low wages and precarious job situations, generation after generation. So within this, there is a big degree of intergenerational trauma, without a doubt. And if we don't speak and recognise this hurt and this pain and converse and listen, allow these narratives to have importance, we really risk meaningful dialogue and collaboration. And part of this, as we've seen in the past, and particularly with climate change and the crisis and increased instability that will be seen in the UK and around the world, there's the risk that these communities, which have been forgotten about the most, could begin to behave in ways that might increase the damage. You can see this, for example, in the northeast of England, where there's been loss of industry and jobs for generations now, and now people are sliding to the far right in reaction to that, because there's been nothing to fill the void. And a less extreme example is communities that are dependent on the fossil fuel industry, who haven't been invited into conversations on climate justice or a just transition, again, maybe repeating voting behaviours or so on, that would not enable the fast transition that we need towards a green economy. So working in these ways I was talking about, this is where I see meaningful solidarity can come in. When we truly get to know the people that we want to support through building understanding with each other's struggles. And what we saw in Glasgow was a huge amount of success, the biggest climate demo in the UK, the biggest demo that's ever been in Scotland. Most importantly, this was led by marginalised communities. And there's a huge amount of feedback from these groups that we structured this in a way where we forefronted their needs and their demands. And most importantly, going forward, all of these groups we worked with said they want to carry on working together in solidarity and in active campaigns into the coming years. Right, I'll finish there.
Thank you very much, Tess. There's so much interesting stuff in there to explore. Thank you very much. And now hand over to Ollie. Thank you very much before we have a Q&A.
Thanks, Tavis. So I'm going to break the rules from the start. I was asked to give specific examples and not speak generally, and I'm not going to give specific examples, and I am going to speak generally. So the first thing I've learned in 20 years of organising is break the rules as soon as you can, because the rules, not all of them, most of them, are made to keep you and me down. It's time to rise up. It's always time to rise up. So I'm Ollie from Breathe. We're a community organising team around climate justice. There's lots to say on that, and not time now. So get in touch with me and Tess, and we'll happily have, 43 people? I'll have 43 phone calls or Zoom calls with you, because I love to talk community, climate, social justice, and I'd love to hear your stories. But in a nutshell, what we're doing is we're looking to put 2 paid organisers in their own communities to organise their communities around climate justice. We're going to create spaces that are safe and empowering in a climate movement that often isn't safe and empowering for a whole load of people. We're going to look to create spaces that are care-based, because the movement doesn't matter if it crushes the people itself. Whatever we do on climate, if the outcome crushes the people doing it, if we burn them out and crush them, doesn't matter. And we're going to create communities where people can be active where they need and where they choose to be. We also believe in stories, telling ours but sharing yours. So I'm going to quickly tell you about me. Then I'm going to dive into 6 key points to run through. I'm from the northeast of England, where I grew up, as Tess has just said, where industry was repeatedly stripped out, businesses shut down, and power holders made promises that were never kept, from shipbuilding to fishing to coal mining. Whole communities crushed and promises made and millions spent and lives not changed. That's an example of how we can get the just transition wrong. We need to get it right. I then moved to the West Midlands, where I studied theology, arts and music, and then shifted that towards climate work. Again, I lived in a community where all the car factories were, the rover factories, repeatedly screwed over, millions spent, that never changed the lives of the people who'd lost their jobs. An example of how we can get the just transition wrong. So my story is I worked in communities with those closest to the pain. I've worked for 20 years. I've been privileged and lucky to do work around creativity that pulls together those who've been heartbroken and hurt, mainly by power holders and systems that crush them. Over the last few years, I've turned that focus, as many of us have, towards climate justice, because time is running out and the world is breaking. And we recognise there's a big international response to climate, but often it's not justice-based. And by that, I mean putting the people first, lifting up and empowering those who are broken, because that's where the real change needs to happen. And that's where the real change currently is failing. And so within that, we created Breathe, to go into communities, to just listen and care and lift each other up and connect. And that's what we want to do with you guys, if you want to do that with us. That's what we want to work towards. We were asked to give you guys some provocations, you guys on this call, from our perspective. And I've been reflecting on that for the past few days, because I like to sit and think about words and what they mean. And the truth is, to make a provocation, to provoke, if done well in a non-hostile way, should be always be something that shifts or refocuses power. So I think it's wrong for me to provoke any of you listening, because I'm on the digital stage. I've got the power. So I was thinking, instead of me provoking you, I want to tell you 3 things I would ask if I was in your shoes. If I was out there looking at me on this digital stage, if I was coming in to talk about working in your community, but I don't live in your community, this is what I would ask me if I was you. Because these are the questions I've asked people repeatedly when they've come to do work in my community. How is your work about us? How is it by, for, and with the communities we are talking about? Like, is it really? Is it really? That's the first question I think you should ask power holders when they come into your community. 2, how does your work, how does my work, put the people central? How is the work not just a 2D prop to increase my CV or the way people see me? Is the work about me as a professional dropping into a community, or is it truly transformative that puts the people in the community at the heart of the work? 3, why is this work needed? The planet's collapsing. Why am I coming to you to say we need to do deep long-term community organising to weave people together when we need to work rapidly? So they're the 3 questions, and I'm not going to answer them. If you want in the Q&A, you can ask those questions to me now, or you can contact me on email. I'd love to talk about them, but I'd love you to think about them. Who is this work for? How does it put the people central? And why is the work needed? And then I'm going to finish with 3 clear suggestions. This is my last bit here. These are the suggestions I would make from the time I've spent working in communities, like really leaning in and caring for each other. I would suggest we work out how we hold our ground, because power holders always tell us to compromise. I don't want compromise for communities. 2, be more collective without compromising your integrity. But that's hard, because what does collective really mean? What does compromise actually mean? And what does integrity actually mean? I'd love to talk about those things with any of you who want. 3, demand more power. Again, don't compromise. I hate compromise. You know who should compromise? People who hold power. People who should compromise are people with finance, with money, who've constantly ruined and crushed communities. We, the people, shouldn't be compromising. We should be working together to push forward for absolute change on our behalf and demanding compromise from power holders that puts us in positions of absolute change for our communities. That's all I've got for you. It's a pleasure to be here. Looking forward to the questions.
Thank you very much, Ollie. And thank you, Bob. Thank you, Tess. Thank you, Ollie. And thank you, Becky, for 3 great 5-minute provocations and ideas and talks. It's really hard to fit things into 5 minutes, so I appreciate that. Now over to you, those of you attending the event. If you want to jump on camera, please share your audio and video, and there will be should be a button up your top right of your screen to do so, and then I can bring you on. So first, if you just want to post something into the chat, and then that'll know I can bring you on to ask a question or have a comment about this. So does anybody want to jump online? Post in the chat first, and then I can bring you on if there's a comment. While I'm waiting to do that, Becky, do you have any comment you wish to raise?
So, well, I was just going to say, I've been tracking the chat, and there's a question in the chat from much earlier, which is about who turns up to some of the event, who's coming along that's not already kind of tuned in and trying to do their bit already. And that was asked by Susie, and I don't know if I've asked that properly or if Susie's there and wants to come in and expand on it.
Susie, do you want to jump on? You need to share your video and audio. No, fab. So Becky, you just want to repeat that question or that comment?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think from the time frame, this is possibly more targeted towards Bob, because I think it's an earlier question. But really, like, who is it? I think fundamentally it's about who is it that you're engaging with. So who, how do you get folks to come along who are not already tuned in and trying to do their bit?
Yeah, so I've just picked that up as well. So yeah, that's the magic of Envirolution is in where it is in the area. So like I was saying before, we take it to them. So we use green spaces, or we're doing one in the city centre this year, which is obviously going to be a lot of footfall, a lot of people going about the shopping, a lot of people who are not necessarily going to ever come to a climate change or environmental education event or festival or anything like that. And there are people that are going to use that space anyway. So so in Plattfields Park in the south of Manchester, there's some very diverse communities around that area. So we have Moss Side and Rusholme, which is a lot of South Asian communities. And then we have Fallowfield, where there's a lot of students. And yeah, lots of different people around. It's a real melting pot. And this is the only green space for them around that area. So we have families who come along just because it's a sunny day, go and see the ice cream man, feed the ducks, that kind of thing. But then, oh, wow, there's this big free event just blasting out, like, yeah, world music and stuff. And so what's this all about? So it's curious people. As time has gone by, and because we've been doing this since 2010. So yeah, as time has gone by, then people have heard about Envirolution. And so we do get a lot of people now who are just have spread the word themselves. Oh, have you been to Envirolution yet? Which is very different from when we started. It's just like, who? Enviro, how do you spell that? Now it's, the word has got around a little bit. So they come along, that's fine, that's great. Bring your friends, absolutely, everyone's welcome. But the people that we're trying to get to are those who have never heard of us before, and we do that by going to the areas where they are. So there's limitations with that, of course, but we're very happy with the amount of people that we do get coming along who have never heard of us before and who have never had these kinds of conversations before. I think that's what it was about with the Envirolution events. With the Climate Assembly, that was harder because we are advertising for people to come along to an assembly. And like I was saying, we were trying to use the terminology like, what would you like your city to look like, and come and have your say, and all these kinds of things. But it's still got Climate Change Assembly written on it somewhere. So you are going to have people who like we're saying, maybe saying a David Attenborough documentary or something like that, and just want something to do. but yeah, we were really pleased with the demographic that we had as far as engagement with the subject or knowledge of the subject. Yeah, we've definitely learned a lot from it as well about trying to engage more diverse people into that conversation and how we can go about that. So yeah, it's a never-ending learning curve, I suppose, isn't it? Yeah. Ollie.
Oh, Ollie.
Yeah, I'm going to answer that one really quickly. Then there's another two from Susie I'll answer quickly, which I think are for us. So with regards to who gets in the room, often it's not the people we want. Well, it is the people we want, but the ones that we really, really want don't. So we've got to find other ways, and that's probably for a further conversation. Tess and I will be doing some organising training on that at the festival. The truth is, it's always fluid. We've always got to change or approach him away and be welcoming and go to people. I can talk about that more at length when we come up. To quickly say to Susie, who said about two organisers, at the minute, basically what's happened is Breathe have just started about a year ago, and we've got organisers South Birmingham, and we're aiming for some of the key areas. Tess has just started in Glasgow, and the first thing Tess said, absolutely rightly, is that Scotland can't be tokenistic. We have to have a long-term plan for a number of areas, potentially Aberdeen. So yes, Susie, we can look at Aberdeen in future, and that would be something we'd love to talk about. We think it's important we pay people and pay them well in their own communities so that they stick there and they take the training we bring and transform the spaces they live, rather than culture fly tipping when organisations come and drop stuff on top of communities without really understanding the core and root and the heart and the story of those places. There was one more question for us and I've lost it. Oh, it was Kate, I think, and she's on, so she can ask it.
So I'm just praising your phrase, culture fly tipping. I think that's awesome. So I'm going to find a way of using that. Yeah, my question relates to really sort of privilege issues within local groups, because I mean, as Tavis is in the same group that I'm in, and I'm really conscious of the fact that quite a number of the very dedicated members that come along to the meetings and discuss the things that we might want to do are coming at this from quite a position of professional and personal privilege. And it's also quite striking that none of us were born here, even though quite a few of us have lived here for quite a long time. I've lived here for 20 years now. It feels like a lot of the time that we're at risk of imposing something that actually the community doesn't want, despite the fact that this is urgent and they should want it. I don't know how to overcome that. The fact that I live in North East Scotland with an incredibly English accent does not help, but that's my chip on my shoulder. I can't help it. Tavis's Australian accent seems much more acceptable. So.
No comment. But I agree. Yeah, totally.
I don't know, Oliver, if you've got any wisdom that you can share here, because also it's a matter of who's got time to do stuff.
I have, but Tess has always got loads of good points on this. Like my first thing to say, and I'll let Tess jump in, is I think people do care about this. It's just how we run it past them. Tess, do you want to jump in with some bits on that, on the kind of connected work that we're doing?
Yes, certainly. I think in every community you'll find a lot of people that do care. It's very rare that people don't know what climate change is today, and I think a lot of people are very quietly sitting at home absolutely crapping themselves, right? And they don't know how to link into other groups and empower themselves. So the work that I've always done in the past is open up the broad question of what does climate change mean to you and your community. So it's an invitation in, it's an invitation of a contribution, it's an invitation of a two-way discussion. And it's long-term relationship building, isn't it? So Kate, what you're saying about, do we have the time for this? But if we're going to do it, you kind of do it or you don't do it. And I think there's also the risk if you don't do it properly, that people, they don't have trust in you, right? It feels like a tokenistic effort. So it is about long-term relationship building. And a part of that is going back time and time and time again to groups. I know one event that I held in Bristol on climate change and migration, and we invited people from every ward in Bristol, and we were told by the diversity manager in Greenpeace that was the most diverse climate event there'd ever been. And what we done, we spent 6 months of just outreach, and it's just like I was overseeing the event, and I had a hell of a lot of logistics to do. It's like the logistics of the event can actually wait, because I need to spend 3 months talking to people, 3 months going to every single ward and visiting community groups and talking to people, and always having that conversation around about climate and your community. So what does this mean? What are you scared of losing? What do you want to, what do you love? What do you want to protect more than anything in the world? And how do we do this without harming ourselves and harming other people? And the conversations, that they come up, they're very real. They're all within the largest social struggles in climate justice, and they're about jobs, they're about food, they're about energy, and not everyone will make those links initially, but that's where some of the events that Bob was talking about come in, and for example, the meetings that we've been hosting in Glasgow. So you allow people in for a two-way discussion on climate change and climate justice and a just transition in this case. But for me, it is very much about you need to ask the question to them. What does it mean to you? And if they are unsure of that, you invite them into a two-way conversation. But it is the long term. It's about longevity more than anything.
So I just want to pop over to very quickly, but I'm going to have to re-break the rules because we've got other people who have questions, and we've only got 7 minutes.
I'll be dead quick. This is dead important. So we were recently in a big funding meeting with very powerful people, and they were really dismissive of the working class. They spoke about they were 2D, and I'm not projecting this on UK, but we need to recognise the poorest and the working class care. They care about trans rights, feminist rights. People of colour are working class people, and they care about engaging with communities, and they care about climate. We'll just use the wrong words. So let's get beyond thinking they don't care. Let's frame it right on energy, food, housing, and let's not make them 2D entities, the 3D people. And they do care. We do care. Just wanted to say that.
And Ollie, I remember you said to me when we were discussing this that sometimes you've got to flip it on its head. Like, we expect people to come to our events. Well, actually, we should be getting out to their events, and we're going to visit them in their places and their workplaces and their communities. So, Adam, you had a question first, followed by Bill. I'll ask the respondees to be fairly brief because we've only got 7 minutes left. So, Adam, over to you.
Yeah, Tess, this is just because I've put some effort into trying to get into local communities. No great success. Do you know of any communities in the northeast of Scotland can you help us actually target some? And if you don't know, how do we find them? So my question is really about those community groups who are not thinking about climate change at the moment, but could be good partners.
Yes, certainly. I don't know around about the northeast that well. There was a COP26 coalition local hub that almost started there, but didn't fully take off. I'm not too sure why. I think it's because there's a Friends of the Earth group there already, right? So I can't talk about local groups, unfortunately, but I'm always quite systematic in my outreach. I will create lists of local faith groups. I will create lists of local community groups, if that's community centres, if that is libraries, other spaces that people meet. I will also go out to approach people working with the land. That will be received in different ways, if that's farmers or otherwise. So I'm just really quite methodical and always, again, doing it in a way that utilises language that would be relevant to the local group and invite them into conversation. But sorry, I can't be more specific about the northeast.
Bill.
Yeah. Great presentation, so thank you. But the question I've got is that I've been doing a bit of reading around attitudes to climate change, and quite a lot of the political science literature talks about hierarchical individualists who don't engage and egalitarian communitarians who do. And most of the people we tend to speak to in these climate change circles are these egalitarian communitarian types. But the northeast economy is very beholden to oil and gas. 30 to 40% of the region's GDP is oil and gas related. And I came across another concept, which I think is really quite useful here, and it's rational motivated ignorance. In other words, a lot of those that are working in these oil and gas industries are still denying climate change, are still stressing the importance of oil and gas to drive this regional economy. And they probably belong to those hierarchical individualists, and they don't engage in discussion, and they tend to shun engagement in climate change. And I think that's quite a tough field to work in up here, because even if they're not directly involved in oil and gas, they're connected in ways through trade, activities, and that's brought wealth into these communities. How are you going to deal with those people? They're not your normal working class people, Oliver. These are people who might have been working class a generation ago, but are pulling in big incomes from oil and gas. Perhaps they still feel working class, I don't know, but they feel threatened by these kind of changes. And you won't get through to the Northeast unless you get through to those people.
Good question, Bill. I want to comment on that.
I think what Tess was saying there is about the use of language, but also it's finding the thing that's relevant to them, isn't it? Climate change and the impacts of climate change is so broad and are going to become so much more obvious if they're not already obvious as time goes by. So it's finding that hook, isn't it? It's finding that way in, and it's never using the word climate change for one. It's something else. It's about something that's relevant to that community, isn't it? So obviously I'm based around the northwest of England in Manchester, and so we've got different communities with different needs, different challenges. But it is just everyone can be engaged about this in one way or another. I really believe that it's just finding that way in, isn't it? And so yeah, finding the way that's going to be relevant to them. So it's not challenging them; it's bringing them on board with it instead. And so once you've got that gateway in, then you can build on that. It could be something simple, and I know this is urgent, and I know we don't have the time for it, but it's, again, like Tess was saying before, if we don't get it right, then all of your energy on that is wasted anyway. So it is about building that trust. So how can you build that trust with that community then? Where's the starting point? That's step one, isn't it?
It's a big topic, Bill. I don't have the time to go into it here, but it's about building trust. I also don't think we should be having this blame culture of the oil and gas industry as the font of all evil. I don't think that's particularly helpful in a place like the Northeast. And it's also about promoting the future opportunities in areas such as renewables, where those skill sets are still very much in demand, and it can be used for the future industries as well. It's a combination of all those things, but probably building trust. And as Ollie says, hours of conversations and working with people.
Yeah, if I can just very quickly come back in, I have those conversations when I walk the dog. I have them with people who are retired from oil and gas all the time. I don't use climate crisis, but time and time and time again, I encounter this enormous resistance based on a narrative where oil and gas can actually do no wrong. And I encounter it all the time.
We have a couple of minutes left, so I want to hand back. We'll do a quick whip around the table. I think, Becky, if you want to start with you, any sort of 30-second closing statements, then I'll go to Bob, then I'll go to Tess, then I'll go to Ollie, and then we can wrap things up.
Yeah, I mean, well, I guess what's come through for me really strongly is a focus on language and how we're connecting with people. And I think that, I mean, I even think back when I started in this work and about how I never framed I came to it from the energy space, and I never used to connect energy and climate because it used to create such tensions in conversations. I think things are aligning much more strongly now, but I really enjoyed hearing about how, particularly from Bob, meeting people where they are, communicating about things that they care about, because actually, fundamentally, it is all tied in with climate change issues as well. So for me, that's a key thing to take away from here.
Bob.
Yeah, there's some really interesting conversations going on here, and yeah, there's a lot of challenges, of course. But for us, it's about trying to create as many spaces as possible for all those conversations to happen, and really listen to those participants that we are engaging. So not going in with answers, they're the experts. With the community assembly, the climate change community assembly that we ran, then we recruited from across the city, and then we didn't even get our venues until we knew where people were coming from, so it was going to be as accessible and easy for them to come along as possible. So it was a bit of a last minute stress, but it was worth it because it was taking it to them. It was going into their space, somewhere they feel comfortable, and they're the experts. We started with an introduction to climate change as a subject, yeah, but then we also had the Climate Psychology Alliance come along, which are lovely, and they talk about the emotional impact of climate change. And it's the first time for anyone that they had the chance to be able to hold this space where they can talk about their anxiety, their emotions and the feelings. So everything that we all have on a daily roller coaster of grief and anger and feeling overwhelmed and all the rest of it, but by talking about it as a group, and then you can build hope from that, and you could see the room just relax and just be like, oh god, this is the first time I've ever been able to talk about this with anyone. It's all this urgency and what can we do. It's creating that space, isn't it? And
we'll have to wind you up, Bob. I'm sorry.
Wind it up.
Sorry, mate. Tess, quick whip.
Thanks. For me, I would say one of the most important parts of this is that marginalised communities are marginalised because they've been systematically marginalised. So we need to meet them on their terms. And this is justice. This is climate justice. This is a just transition. And that people do care, like we've said. They care about their family. They care about their work. They care about their future. And this is all part of the just transition. This is all part of climate justice. So allow them to talk and allow us to build power collectively as we do so.
Ollie, over to you for the final word.
Civil rights and social justice have historically been attritional but seasonal. We come like the tide at a problem, then we back off. But because we failed so often on climate breakdown, we no longer have time to be like the tide. We have to come at this constantly. So all I have to say is we need a new tactic and a new system based upon ancient ways of working, like community coming together. Breathe want to do that with you guys. We're keen to get it right and do this beautiful work.
Thank you so much to all our speakers this morning on Saturday. It's been fascinating. We could go for hours. Climate Week Northeast, Tess, Ollie, they'll be running workshops, so get involved in that. The contact details are there. Thank you for our audience as well. And we'll see you in our next session in a couple of minutes on fundraising and raising resources to achieve all these things. Thanks a lot, everybody. See you in a bit.